Hello, and thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Digital Dilemmas. We are sort of getting back to our digital roots this week, and the overarching topic is cell phones. And we're going to take a look at how usage has been shown to affect different demographics and what you can do to potentially make your relationship with your cell phone healthier.
Digital Dilemmas is a Link Media original podcast. Yeah, thanks for the intro, Amber. I've been seeing a lot of the impact of phones in the classroom as each group of students comes through over the last 8 years. And we talk about it openly. We try some experiments in the room, and I think it's worthwhile talking about because it not only impacts students, it impacts parents, it impacts their grandparents, it impacts all of us. And I think it'd be good to have an episode on, yeah, let's talk about these phones and let's talk about its impact. So I'll just jump right in. I
Jump
think
right
that
in.
today I want to talk about how these phones are designed, and by phones I mean the smartphone, not just the cell phone of the 90s, but the smartphones. I want to talk about
The
how they're,
phones that everybody's using today.
yeah.
Nobody's using a
Well, there are, and we'll
Nokia.
talk about
I,
there
I
are.
understand there are hipsters who have gone back to the flip phone, but in general, most people have a smartphone.
Right. We're going to talk about how they're designed, its impact on our behavior, our mental health, impact on children under 16.
Right. So tell me.
All right. So let's talk about how these phones are designed. So it's no accident that all of us, me included, we get addicted to these things. There are psychological principles at play here in their design. So let's talk about some of them. One, here's a behavior that we all do, the infinite scroll. When we're on our phones and we jump on a platform, a social platform, the never ending feed. What is that about? So, that design mechanism is hijacking our brain's dopamine system. We actually are getting high off of that as we doom scroll, that's a phrase we use. So, that's a design feature to keep us on the phone. Another design feature that messes with our brains. The push notifications. So every ding, every buzz, uh, every color that we like, red, uh, it tells our brain that there's a sense of urgency. And if we don't look at the phone, we might be missing out on something. The old FOMO, fear of missing out on something. So we all have this feeling. I'll ask you, Amber, when the phone is near you, on you, on the nightstand at night, and it buzzes or dings or whatever it does, I think all of us, we look over at it or we hear it and think about it and go, should I pick it up?
I have been, this is one area with my phone where I have been proactive. I have all of the notifications turned off. So the only time that it buzzes is if somebody texts me. Um, I don't get alerts for any of the apps that I use. Um,
And that's one of the behaviors you've adopted to improve your mental health use of your phone. But
yeah, I
a
don't,
lot of people haven't. And we'll get to that in a second. But I've done the same thing. I've turned all my
but you
push
used to not
notifications
have
off.
it. You used to
Oh,
not have them off, and it would ding it
all
felt
night.
like every minute.
Yeah, and
Um,
you don't get your sleep is not as good, which screws with your mental health.
well, it's distracting.
Yeah. So we'll get to how we fix it, but the push notifications are a design feature, a design capability built by the phone makers to keep us addicted to the phone.
And you can tell that the apps want you to turn it on by the way that, by the UI. whenever you sort of download an app and are setting up your account or your profile, it pushes you to turn on the notifications.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and on, on the social platforms on TikTok, I know every time, or is it TikTok? Yeah, every time I follow a new account on TikTok, it says, "Do you want to get notifications every time this person posts something new?" It's very the apps and the platforms are very aggressive about trying to make sure that you have notifications on for every possible event.
100%. So that you're kind of sliding into the next design feature that messes with our brains. They call it variable rewards. So this is a slot machine psychology. Um, if you get a like, a comment, or any type of content that might be the algorithm decides is good for you, and you decide, yes, I want to be notified, the unpredictability of, gee, maybe you got a like, maybe you got a comment. So, for example, I'm on Substack now, and it asks me, do I want to be notified if someone subscribes or makes a comment on one of my articles? So, for the first few weeks, I said yes. It's human nature. I want to know if people are engaging in my content.
Well, it's not
And
just human nature.
every time I get a Substack notification, I'm checking my phone to see if it's
Right.
about me or somebody else's article until I realize this is insane. Sorry, go ahead.
There are ways, I mean, and I don't want to step on the end of the show, but there are things you can do to control that. Like,
Yeah,
because I think in some ways notifications can be helpful. Like for you, or anyone starting out with Substack account, um, and presence, it can be helpful to know every time somebody likes or comments on your content because you want to make sure to engage with them. You don't, as someone who's looking to get traction on a platform, that can be helpful.
yeah, agreed. But I think what I'm learning is, do I need to respond to people that moment, or should I just check it 4 times a day or 2 times a day, and like have certain designated times where I engage?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So So let's talk about the next piece I want to talk about is its impact on mental health and human behaviors, especially for those under 16. Studies are showing the attention span, I think everybody can relate to this, shrinking. There's an incredible decline in sustained focus and attention span that goes beyond, well, the studies say long periods, the ones I've been looking at, but I'll ask you and anybody out there listening, what's the attention span? Has our attention spans shrunk? And we'll get to the under 16 group in a second. Oh my goodness.
I think so, definitely. I mean, I think we see it with the boys. They're When all of the content that you consume is this short format content, your brain becomes used to it. And it like I'm excited when my kids watch a movie because they're committing to 2 hours of one sort, they're not double screening. 2 hours of it's a long format content. And I think that that's good. I think that's good for your brain. I think that's good. I don't know, for
I,
for everyone. And I think it's, because the platforms are so based around short format, these quick hits of information, it's training your brain to be used to that.
yeah, I've asked my students this semester, if you happen to be watching a ball game or a movie or a streaming show that you like, and because the reason I ask them is because I notice it in myself. Can you go the whole show, the whole ball game, the whole movie without double screening and checking your phone? They all went, absolutely not. We have to be doing two or three things at the same time. Like sitting down and watching something, even a 23-minute streaming service show, is near impossible.
Well, streaming is easier because of the lack of ads. I think that
But they
um
still can't do it. They're on their phone at the same
no,
time.
well, I don't know who's throwing stones. You can't do it either. Um when commercials come on, it used to be an opportunity to get up and move around or interact with the person that you're watching the show with, and talk about what's going on in the show. Now it's an opportunity to pick up your phone and check the news or scroll through Twitter or Instagram or whatever your choice of social media is. And I think that's detrimental. I think it takes you away from being present. It, and it sounds weird because people don't think of watching television as like a communal activity, but
It used to be.
it used to be. And I think it can be. I think, it can be a way to connect with people around stories or story arcs or, things like that. And when you remove yourself, because when you go on your phone, you really are removing yourself from being
100%.
present.
So imagine if you have four people in a room, just four. To your point, if we're watching a ball game or a movie or a show that we're all watching, we can express ourselves. We might share how we feel. We might have a reaction to the game, and as a community of four, we're interacting with each other. To your point, there's four individuals watching the show on their own because their attention is on their phone, not the
Or even if they're not watching the show on their own, even if they're watching the ball game with everybody, but as soon as it cuts to commercial, they're on their phone and
That's
in
my
in their
point.
own
Now they
world.
become an
That's
individual in a cubicle. They're
yes,
not part of a group of four.
right.
All right, the next one we've already talked about, disrupted sleep. So from my own personal experience, this was a big win for me about a year ago. I'm usually a great sleeper. Sleeping has been easy for me, luckily, most of my life. But about a year ago, I was really struggling. Um, I could fall asleep, but I would, as we mentioned earlier, every time the phone went off, I would wake up just a little bit, interrupting the deep sleep. I noticed after several months it was affecting my energy level at work, my attention span, my moods, um, anxiety levels were up. And I did some research, decide like we spoke about earlier, I turned off all notifications and made sure as best I could not to be on the phone before falling asleep. Just the
Right.
turning off the notifications has been a game changer for me. And there's other things we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But turning off notifications, which is easy to do in your settings, game changer. I don't need to be buzzed at 2 in the morning that the Red Sox just scored 3 runs on their West Coast trip. I could, and
Well, that's what
even
it is. It's about like
I know.
for me it's texting because I don't have that. I don't have. I'm not on a lot of group texts. I don't in my my phone isn't buzzing incessantly from receiving text or phone calls. So for me, having having it just be phone calls and texts is that's what I want. That's what I want to be alerted to. That's what and it's on silent, which helps.
That helps.
Um,
It's the buzzing thing is what got me. It would wake me up.
right. Um, but you can set it to your own, like if you want to know, um, if you want certain notifications, if you want news notifications, or you want notifications for certain people posting content on certain platforms, you can set it up so that it's your own personal, gatekeeping system of what information can get through. And even with texts and phone calls, you can put certain people on bypass. So, I can set it up so that I'll get all of my texts and phone calls, or all of them will be, I'll be on quiet mode, except for my mother, because I know if my mother's trying to reach me at 11 o'clock at night, it's an emergency,
Right.
that sort of thing, or except for the kids. So there are things that you can do to sort of customize and prioritize what information makes it through.
Yeah, I think what we're getting at here, and as we go through the show, this is a perfect example, and it's the most fundamental, basic example of the phones. We've all got one of us owning the technology, configuring it so it works for us in its strongest sense, but it reduces the mental health issues that we all have with the phones. All right, next topic, social skills. So we're seeing, and right after this, we're going to talk about impact on kids under 16. But the social skills, face-to-face communication, suffering. A lot of kids are struggling with eye contact, patience, deep conversations. Um, so these phones are inherently changing the way we think, we feel, and we interact with each other. And they're designed that way. So the first 15 minutes, this is, these phones are designed that way to keep us on them, and they're not helping us in that sense. So that gives us the foundation of where we're going to go next with this. I want to talk about impact on kids under 16. And for me, this is like the big piece. I think a lot of us can, what we just talked about for 15 minutes, we can configure and structure our phone usage and own it. That's great. But what the kids under 16 is a whole different game, and I really want to talk about it. I'm going to set up with this. First of all, the human brain, the female human brain finishes growing around 21-ish. I'm not a doctor, but around 21-ish. The male brain finishes growing around 23-ish, which makes sense. We get that with anybody who's grown up. We know the girls are a couple years ahead of the boys in emotional development and cognitive development. But imagine, I want to lay it out like this. Imagine your middle school experience, your high school experience, which was very emotional and challenging for all of us. So many changes going on in our lives, and we're in school with all our peers and having a phone. I can't imagine it. It's a challenge, but
So,
the reason that I'll let you jump in a second. I just want to finish the sentence. Why does this age group matter? Their brains are still developing, their self-worth, their habits, and their emotional regulations are still being shaped. And yet they've got this machine in front of them that's designed to mess with their brains. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
so no, it's okay. I was talking about this with William, with one of our boys the other day.
And he's 16.
He's 16, and we were talking about it because I was talking about Selah, my niece, who I think I've mentioned on this show. My sister is much stricter with technology and media and all of these things than I was. And, her daughter, who is 5, about to be 6, is having a much different experience than my 2 children did. And I was talking about this with William, and because we were talking about Selah and how Selah was going to start watching certain movies, and how my sister was sort of how she was doing that and managing that. And I was telling him how she came home from school and she was like, I'm the only kid without a tablet
Without a
at five
tablet, right?
with a,
So
at 5.
she doesn't have technology on her. And she's what, 5?
She's 5, and she's
5.
the only kid who doesn't have a tablet.
Right.
And seemed shocking, but then I thought back, and my kids had tablets when they were 5, in those big padded
Right.
cases that they had, and they were playing Minecraft, and they were on YouTube, um and then they got phones very early because of the divorce, because they needed a way to get in touch with, either parent when they were not at that parent's house. Um,
Right.
so they got cell phones, I want to say it really young. And at first, it was only for texting. Um, but kids get phones early now. If they have tablets at 5, imagine, it's not that big a jump to a phone. And so I think of our, not Samantha so much, but of William and Andrew as definitely part of that digital generation who has grown up digital natives. They have grown up on this technology, and it's built into their lives in a way that they can't fathom really being without it.
Right. So studies are starting to come out, so I want to talk about them, especially for the kids. That's the category we're talking about now. Obviously, their brains are still in a rapid period of growth, impacted by these phone screens, which are rewiring their brain's reward system. And we will get to that probably in episode 2 about this. The phones that they have, more than likely, are the regular phones we all have, which means they have access to and they're on social media, which messes with their realities, for lack of a better phrase, and increases anxiety. They also have uh, exposure to dangerous content, pornography, cyberbullying, predatory behavior, etc. And the studies that are coming out now after an entire generation of research is not good. Nothing good about this at all. So let's move into the solutions.
Yeah, because I was
I don't
just gonna say, like, what's
right.
the answer? The answer is not to give these kids phones.
No, but
That's
there are phones now, and they're starting to really hit the market. And I want to share this with people. I'll we'll talk about in episode 2. I'll have some notes put out there on the episode guide. There are phones being sold now that have all the capabilities you need to communicate, texting, safety things, everything you need if your parents need to get a hold of you or you need to text your parents. But the phones literally do not have the capability to download a social media app. I get it, they can find another way to do that, but you can buy phones that do not allow social media apps to be on them.
I think a
Number
lot of kids today would say, what's the point then? What's the point of having a phone?
Bingo, isn't that great? The only point of having a phone at all at that age is safety reasons to get a hold of your parents. There is no reason, I don't think there's any reason for someone under the age of 16 to have a phone. I really don't. And
I don't know.
our
I
kids,
disagree.
you disagree.
I disagree. I
Um,
disagree. I watched my kids and how sort of enrichment and joy and fun and entertainment they got from watching YouTube and playing Minecraft, and um I don't know. I don't know that I think that it damaged them so much. I mean,
how about
when one of them
how
turns out to
about
be a
the how
serial
about the
killer, I don't want the blame, but
how about this piece of it? Another potential solution. Tell me what you think of this, because we're seeing studies that show this is really working well. In Australia and in Denmark and in some other countries in Europe, they are making the kids put the phones into a locker for the day. And
I'm
the
all
kid
for that. I'm
no,
all for,
let
sorry.
me finish the study. They put the phone in the locker so that the child all the way through high school does not have the phone personally on them until they leave school.
Right.
And what they're finding is they're outside playing more,
Right.
their grades are going up, their attention spans are going up, their social skills are going up. Like everything that we mentioned on this show that we're worried about
Right.
is improving. And all they had to do was just put the phone in a locker when you walked into school and you pick it up on your way home. Just that part is making significant mental health and physical health differences for these children. What do you think of that?
I'm all for that. I think that setting limits like that is the way to the future. Having and we saw the other day on a television show we were watching that
Yeah, it was
they
a great
had it was the
episode, great
Thanksgiving
example.
episode,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everybody at the beginning, the host was like, okay, everybody, I want you to put your phone in the basket.
right.
um but it's funny because in that episode, it's an old episode, I don't want to give spoilers, but anyway, in
Yeah,
that
don't, yeah.
episode, I won't give spoilers, but the phones were in the basket and there was an important text message that theoretically or hypothetically or potentially wasn't going to get through because the phone was in the basket, and it was like life or death.
Well, and I think
So
the reason that happened in that show, and it's a good example. We used to have landlines in our house. So if the phone rang on the landline, even if we had 20 people over for Thanksgiving, you would hear the phone. You could choose to answer it or not. If you didn't answer, it would go to your answering machine. You could hear the message. And if it was
I
an
would
emergency,
argue that in
what?
this situation, the person would not, the person that was trying was being texted was at a different, like at a someone else's house for Thanksgiving. So even if the person had had a landline and had in their home, which they wouldn't have because they were underage, they're 16 or 17.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just saying this is a new era. This is a new era, and there are some things that are good about it. There are some things that are good about
100%.
um,
A hundred percent.
having phones and being able to be reached, and
But you know
like
what I thought?
as
You know
the
what I
child.
thought when I saw that episode? You know what the first thing I thought,
What?
besides the sadness of the moment, uh, was when someone texts somebody today, we expect them to see it.
Right.
Think about that. That's a whole
Right.
different level of expectations
Yeah.
between human beings. Like if I text you from
I know
work,
what you're saying. I know what you're
you
saying. And
know,
I don't answer. I
right? I think
you
something's
do it.
wrong.
I like 2 hours later, I'll get a text being like, what's going on? Where are you?
But I'm just saying that how it's changed our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. I
It's
totally get it.
interesting. It's
It
interesting,
is.
but at the same time, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think that,
Oh, I'm not a,
as the parent of uh as a divorced parent, I my kids are able to FaceTime me whenever they want when they're not at my house. And that's huge. That's like that's huge for me.
so let's talk about, I want to walk through a checklist that I've researched and documented. I want to get your thoughts. A checklist for kids and for ourselves
Okay.
to improve our mental and physical health use with these phones. Some like 4 or 5 for each category. So for kids, delay, emphasis on the word delay, smartphone access, especially social media, for as long as you can, like past 5, past 10. I'm a proponent of 16, but whatever. Delay smartphone access for as long as possible. That's number one. Number two, set parental controls, time limits, and restrict harmful content on their phone.
Hmm.
Number three, encourage phone-free zones
Right.
at home, like when we're eating meals or
Yeah.
bedtime
Or watching a movie
or
or
watching. Right, establish what you think is for your family a phone-free zone or a phone-free moment.
right.
Number four, teach children critical thinking, help them recognize the manipulative algorithms and the unhealthy content and the unhealthy uh, technology that goes with these phones and these apps. Just
Right.
teach them. Let's let they know. All right, for ourselves, turn off non-essential notifications to reduce distractions. Number one. Number two, and we'll talk about this for a minute. I just did this yesterday. We're going to talk about it. Use grayscale mode. So this makes the screen less visually stimulating. And I
What
read,
explain what it just for dummies.
yeah,
Putting it
I'm
on
done.
grayscale mode means everything on your phone is black and white.
Yeah, remember the old black and white TVs? And if you're too young, watching a black and white movie. When you go to grayscale mode, which you can do in your settings, and again, I'll put these in the show notes. Everything on your phone goes to gray, black, and white. There's no more color. And studies have shown that you will reduce use of your social media and reduce use of your phone by 30 to 50% per day. So I did this uh, about, what time is it now? 2:30. I did this at 6 o'clock this morning. I have been on my phone about 30 to 50% less this day. When you go to grayscale mode, it's no longer fun. The color on our phones are hitting our brains and making it exciting. It's kind of like when we were kids, if you're old enough, when we went from black and white TV to color TV. It became wicked exciting. If you take your phone and you put it in grayscale mode, it's yuck. It's
I
just,
don't know, yuck, but it's not
it's
hitting
just not
those dopamine or
appealing.
serotonin.
It's not appealing to my brain. So I found I'm only on it to see did someone send me an important message?
Which is
Uh,
really
yeah, right.
what you
I'm
should be
using it
using
like I
it for.
should. And it
Yeah.
has freed up. I'm one day into this. I'm going to try it for a week. When I'm watching a show or I'm doing some work for school or my job, I have found over the last many years, just like we talked about, my attention span's a little shorter than it was 20, 30 years ago. I'll check my phone. Just today, I went to check my phone and went, nah, it just wasn't appealing to my brain. And maybe I took a break from work for 5 minutes, but I wasn't on my phone.
Right.
I'm really interested to see how this works over a week. But
Yeah, I think that's a great
number
tip.
two, so number one was turn off non-essential notifications. Number two, go to grayscale mode. It'll be a game changer.
Okay, what's number
Number th-
three?
Number three, set app time limits. So that means,
Limit the
uh,
amount of time you can spend on apps.
yeah, you can actually do that in settings too. Like if I say I can only be on Facebook for 2 hours a day,
Right.
um, I did something yesterday. I was very upset with what was going on politically, and I got sucked into the unhealthy mental health aspect of a Facebook social media app. I started posting, I must have posted 10 or 11 posts. I was upset, but it was addictive.
Yeah.
I immediately caught myself after about 20 minutes and went back and
Not immediately.
I deleted
Oh,
like eight of them. But this gets to the setting the app time limits. Like, help yourself. Just go to
yeah.
settings and say I can only be on Facebook this amount of
Well,
time per
think
day.
how much time are you comfortable
Right.
spending
Right.
on because I think everybody would be surprised if they went on their phone and they looked and saw how much time they were spending on specific apps. I think it would
Right.
be surprising. I don't think we realize that it adds up.
Number four, practice a digital detox uh, time space each day. So, for example, I have decided over the last several months that when I go to the gym and work out with my trainer, there are certain parts of each day. When I'm in the classroom now, I put the phone away. When I'm at the gym, I put the phone away. I don't want to know if someone texted me. I'm working out with my trainer for 45 minutes. It's an important part of my day.
Yeah.
I do not need to be checking messages. So that's what they call a digital detox moment during the course of each day. Just say, I'm not, when I do this, I'm not going to be on the phone. And the last thing is, as you go through what I'm finding is if we go through the first four, the fifth is prioritize real world activities, prioritize exercise, hobbies, face-to-face interactions, personal relationships, things that you enjoy. Prioritize those, and when you're doing those, you're not on your phone. I think these are I love these that were recommended, and I documented them, and that's why I'm sharing them. I think these are game changers to reclaim our own attention from the attention economy, to reclaim some mental health and reclaim physical health. And so I'm hoping that these 5 for adults that I mentioned and these 4 for kids that I mentioned might make a difference for each of you. That's what I think, anyway.
Well, thank you. And that's we are coming up on time, so I am going to throw out there, if anybody else has any tips, any of our listeners have any other tips or advice for how to use your phone in a healthy way, please send them along with any suggestions for speakers or topics to digitaldilemmas@lenk.media, and we will incorporate it into our future shows. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, Digital Dilemma fans, that wraps up another episode. Thanks for tuning in and navigating our tech world with us.
Please rate us and leave a review. And if you enjoyed it, tune in next time. We'd also love it if you would send us any questions or suggest guests via email. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast.